Hello and welcome to the 5th installment of the Cloudscape devlog series. It's been quite a while since my last video, like an entire month. I really wanted to do a weekly video or at least a video every other week, but it's hard for me to weigh the time investment of making a devlog over just getting more progress done with the game. Overall, it's just quite a process, and I'm not sure if I can speed up how long it takes to make one, so it kind of is what it is. So as you can see here, I have a new title screen. It is very placeholder. There's some stuff on here for testers that I haven't released a test version yet, so that's in the works. If you are interested in testing the game as early as possible, I will be posting about it on the Discord eventually, coming in the next couple of weeks probably. So I have some basic background art here that I threw in just as a template, as it's going to be all animated and pretty at some point, but right now I just wanted to have some color in here, so yeah. I've set up a main menu system here. Right now it isn't using the controller or keyboard at all. It's fully mouse controlled, so that's one thing I'm going to have to add in the future. But for now it's functional, so I'm just going to go with it. So the settings button doesn't work yet. The exit game actually takes you out of the game, so I'm not going to click that. We have these 4 buttons down here for social media stuff, but the main button here is start game. In start game, we have 3 slots that you can currently pick from. I'm actually going to go ahead and just delete these to show how that works. You can just either copy and then click a slot to copy over to, and it copies over the exact data, so you can make as many backups as you want. Or you can start a new game, which when you click this, you'll go to a new game. I do plan to have, I think, unlimited slots available. I mean, as many as your computer can store, but for now there's just the 3. I think that once these 3 fill up, I'll have another, like an arrow here to let you go over to a new slot, and you'll be able to go to as many slots as you want back and forth. So it'll just kind of dynamically expand. Anyway, let's start a new game. So one thing is, I have been working on optimization, and I think I've got the game loading a little faster. I've shaved off like a couple of seconds overall. So let's see how long it takes to load. Still need a loading screen, but yeah, here we are. We're in the game. Looks pretty much the same as before, but there's a lot that I've changed, so let's start going over it. To kick things off, I can showcase a little polish I added, which is just having some dust kick up as you move around. The dust actually changes color depending on the type of surface you're moving around on. This isn't really an essential feature or anything, just something I feel makes the character feel more grounded into the environment. So here you can see we have a little bit of white dust kind of kick up as he's running on grass. It's a little green tinted, I think, and then it's a little brown tinted in the dirt, and then finally in the beach it's a little tan beach sand color tinted. On top of dust kick up, I added a simple little overlay image when the player is in shallow water. I've also added some simple splashing effects as you move around in the water as well. I even went ahead and did the same effect for items in the water. So now you can drop stuff in the shallows and it will feel more like it's in the water instead of sitting on top of it. I still need to add some splashing when the items drop or are tossed into shallow water, but so far so good. I haven't gotten around to what I'm going to do with the deep water yet. I'm not sure if I want to have the players swim in it. I mean, for the most part right now, there isn't any reason to swim. The bodies of water on the island are pretty small, and the ocean is just vast and empty. I'm considering that swimming will take a lot of stamina, which means you'll only be able to swim out so far from the water. Though, swimming has a lot of issues involved. Like, what happens if you run out of energy or somehow die in the ocean? You can't necessarily respawn in the ocean, or you'll just drown again. So I'd need to have a whole reset system built into the game to respawn you at some previous point when you were still on land. I'm just not really sure what I'm doing with it yet, so for now I'm shelving it. The next thing I've added is campfires. These are pretty much fully working now. You can craft and place them. I haven't yet tinkered with burning other things, but for now the campfire burns just fine. So when you place a campfire down, you press the action key to light it. The campfire has a lifespan, so the fire will burn out after a certain amount of time. I'd like to have the fire get smaller as it dwindles down, but for now it just stays one size. When objects burn, they slowly take damage. Since most objects have some type of hit points, this works nicely since I can just burn anything and have it take damage over time. The campfire is special though, since when it burns out, it doesn't destroy, but it remains there in a burned state. Most objects will just destroy after losing all hit points. I added some particle effects and lighting to the fire, as you can see, and also I've implemented the wind system into the fire so the particles move with the wind. The little blocky embers are just temporary though, as I plan to replace those with actual sprites at some point. You can see it's blowing away in the wind to the right. As I said earlier, the campfire is fully working as you can put out the fire with water. Right now it's just using the water can, but there will be other ways to put out the fire in the future. I also don't have an actual animation for the watering can yet, so this is pretty much what it's doing. It's just an empty tool slot. You can relight the fire with the action key and put it out as often as you'd like, until the campfire runs out of hit points and then it will permanently burn out. I want to also add a way to stoke the fire and make it last longer, and that will probably just involve being able to place wood or other fuel sources directly onto the fire. The purpose of the campfire right now is to provide light in the dark and to also provide protection from monsters. Most monsters will actually try to avoid the light of the fire, which means you can stay relatively safe inside the light. That isn't to say the monsters absolutely can't attack you in the light, they will do it if you lure them in too close. Monsters in Cloudscape actually take damage from the light, which is why they only exist during the night or in the dark areas. They are physically wounded by light, which you can use to your advantage. Of course, not every monster will have aversion to light. Some will run into the light to fight you, even if it means taking damage. So yeah, campfire working, embers and smoke blowing in the wind. Speaking of blowing, I reworked the wind system. Oh boy did I rework the wind system. Before, a handful of objects were affected by the wind, and they all pretty much just instantly started shaking in one direction. And all just instantly stopped shaking when the wind had passed. Now each object has its own shake and will react more organically to the wind, with nice offsets to break things up a bit. I also added easing to most of it, so objects pick up speed with shaking and also slow down going back to stationary. Another key thing I changed was that when you shake objects manually, say by hitting a tree or walking through grass, the effect of shaking and the wind blowing will combine together, so you can walk through grass that is blowing and it will also shift the grass as you walk through it. Before I changed this, the wind just dominated everything, so you'd walk through some tall grass and it didn't really seem to react to you, only the wind. The other thing I made affected by wind is rain. I had previously added rain as a test, but it really didn't do anything special. I'm in the middle of building out a weather forecast system, which sounds simple, but it's actually really complex. See, I want the game to plan out weather patterns for at least the duration of the season. This means I need to have the game plot out all of the weather that will happen. This itself isn't too hard, but there's a lot of conditions and variables that come into play. Like for example, it should rain more during the spring, less during the summer, it should be more windy in autumn, and it should snow in winter. But on top of that, I need to factor in how heavy the rain and wind and snow are, along with adding cloudy days or cloud coverage. The real trick is that each island has its own weather, which means I need to set up default conditions for each island. To make matters even more difficult, there are many things on the island that react to weather. Things that can grow need to be able to get wet in the rain, and since rain directly affects growth cycles, I need to calculate out all of the growth for things when you revisit an island. Just for an example, you'll be able to leave an island and come back to it later, which means you can come back to it a day later, a week later, or even several seasons later. It would be weird if you left an island and came back to it 2 seasons later and there was no change to the island in terms of plant growth. So yeah, I need to plot out the forecast for all of the time since you last visited, and then update all vegetation to grow according to all of that weather. I'm halfway done with this feature, so I'm pretty excited about finishing it as it's a pretty major thing and I think it's at least sort of unique to this game. If you know of any other games that have a full complex weather system, let me know, because I'd love to check them out. In most games like this, weather is just a static thing. You wake up, it's raining, all the crops are watered. You go to bed, it's sunny, all the crops are dry. It's way easier to control the state of things when the player is forced to basically reset the day by sleeping. In Cloudscape, you can stay up all night, so crops need to react in real time. Rain needs to come and go. There needs to basically be a real working ecosystem. I realize it's quite a challenge I've set up for myself, but that is what my dream game is about, so I'm not cutting corners now. Moving on from all the weather stuff, I also took some time to add in custom floor paths the player can place down. This actually required quite a bit of work as I needed to set up a way to update tiles and then also deal with different possible interactions with those tiles. For example, you can place down both wood and floor paths right now. These look pretty ugly to be honest, and I'm going to have to redo the artwork, but setting that aside, you can see how the paths are placed on top of the ground. I had to do some extra work to make sure you couldn't place paths on top of tilled soil. In fact, I updated the structure system so you also can't place structures on tilled soil. It honestly just didn't make any sense to allow it. This also means I had to update the hoe tool to not allow for tilling soil under paths or structures. But now that's all worked out and paths are working fine, I just need to make them look better. You'll also be able to change the look of the paths depending on different variations. For like example, right now they're kind of randomly placing down these horizontal slabs and these vertical slabs. This is totally random for now, but in the future, the structure tool will have the ability to shift between different variations and also different directions. So for example, for this, you'll be able to hit like the shoulder keys to switch between vertical or horizontal tiles or even curved paths. Oh yeah, and you may have noticed some new things around the island. I added another type of mushroom and also replaced the old round nondescript bushes with actual berry bushes. I actually spent several days rebuilding how I'm doing these objects in the game. I was initially going down a path of making all of these very similar objects, but each having their own code. I had bushes, flowers, crops, and mushrooms all in their own scripts, but a lot of them were sharing most of the core functionality. Some of them blew in the wind, some of them grew, some of them could have multiple harvests. So what I ended up doing was making two core object scripts, one being a growable type of object and the other being a forageable type. Essentially, the growable stuff would be all of the various crops, the flowers, mushrooms, berry bushes, and the forageable stuff is all of the things that don't have a growth cycle, like seashells or random things that wash up on the beach. Rebuilding these scripts allowed me to greatly improve all of these objects. Now I plan to have mushrooms and berry bushes have growth cycles. Before, they just sort of popped into existence. You can also water any growable object to help it grow. It also means you will be able to plant literally everything, not just being restricted to crops. You can plant the mushrooms or the berry bushes, fruit trees, pretty much anything. I also took this time to improve the harvesting system. Before I had it set up to only harvest from a crop that has multiple harvests, but now it works with both multiple and single harvest crops. Remember when I mentioned that rain wets things now? Well, it wets all of the growable things. This is how most of the things in the game will grow. Essentially, most things will need a couple of days to reach a new stage of growth, and each day the thing must be watered to move it forward in growth. This works pretty much like how crop systems work in other farming games, with the added change of it all happening in real time and not locked to specific time cycles. By the way, when I say real time, I don't mean things grow at the real hours of the day, just that the things grow without having to reset the day and come back. You can literally sit there and water a crop and watch it grow over the span of 5 in-game days if you want to. Not that I'd personally recommend that. Finally, for another pretty big addition to the game, I've added the first floor of the caves. This is pretty major as it's the first time the player is going to a new area. I had to work out how to load an entirely different scene and also connect the entrances and exits together dynamically. This actually still has some issues I'm ironing out, but it's mostly working. The caves are totally procedurally generated, and in fact, they are using a completely different method than the island generation. For the island, I used a combination of different levels of Perlin noise and used Poisson disk for object placement, which I covered in my previous video on trees. For the cave, I'm actually using cellular automata. What this basically boils down to is a fancy way of saying it generates a bunch of random blobs and then checks the adjacent tiles to determine what it should fill in as a wall and what it should remove to make as an open area. If there's a certain amount of empty blocks around a block, it removes that block to create more space. If there's a certain amount of filled blocks around a block, it fills that block to solidify a wall space. Giving it a few more rules, it is capable of creating some nice organic looking spaces. Then it's just a matter of detecting these spaces and connecting them together by drawing lines from one space to the other and filling those lines with empty blocks. The end result is a nice little organic, cavernous type shape in which the player can access all of the areas. I'm really happy with how this turned out. The caves still need a lot of work. I really want to do more with the artwork in here. Also, I need to set up the monster system to spawn monsters inside at different intervals, as the monsters can thrive in the dark. I also realized I'm definitely going to need to add a torch tool and some lantern or something you can place down to help illuminate the caves, as I made them quite dark since almost no light is getting in. I went ahead and also added both iron ore and coal ore deposits to the game, so you can now mine iron and coal to help craft more things. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I don't think it's working in this current slice of the game. They are implemented though. Right now it says generating all rocks, but they're in there, trust me. These are just randomly generating using the same method I used for rocks and trees on the island. A couple of interesting things to note about these caves. 1. There will be many floors you can descend. 2. You will find more rare ore and items farther down along with tougher monsters. 3. Ore doesn't respawn. Once you've mined it, that's it. It won't auto-generate all new stuff when you leave and come back. In fact, it all stays exactly how you left it. There's a finite amount of resources in any cave system. My plan for the cave is to make it feel like a real expedition. You can pack up on food for energy, bring all of your torches and other mining tools, and proceed deeper and deeper into the caves. You don't have to worry about warping out before 2 AM either. You can stay down in the caves for days, only to return to the surface to find vegetation has grown since you've been away. Oh, and a small little thing to point out to wrap this up. I added light at the entrance, which I plan to visually improve in time as well. However, I just wanted to point out that the light colors and intensity actually updates based on the amount of light coming in from outside. It's just a little detail I enjoyed adding. Oh, and I almost forgot, I've been working on the hammer tool, which is what you can use to destroy structures and other things on your island. Right now it's just a little question mark icon, but there will be a hammer, and right now there's actually a hammer, but there's no actual tool icon for it. You can flatten tilled soil, and you can destroy placed paths. As you can see here, I can flatten out all this soil back to normal. And you can destroy paths as well. And you can damage structures until they destroy also. So you can hit a fence until it destroys. And I already set it up, so if you destroy a piece of fence, the surrounding fences update as well. So these fences change their graphic based on the fences surrounding them, even after destroying stuff. So we can make another hole here. Just open up our fence. And go right here. And open up our fence. I actually had an annoying bug with this part of the code, and it took me several hours to figure out what the heck was happening. But I got it all worked out, and that's working great now. You can see I can add fence back in here, and just as much fence as I want, and everything kind of updates according to the bit mask. We can destroy this wood here, and everything updates. That wraps up what I've been doing for the past few weeks, actually month. Some major additions and restructuring happened. I forgot to mention that I've also spent quite a bit of time optimizing code. Sometimes I don't use best practices, and it just means I need to go back in later and clean things up a bit. I realized I have a bad habit of using Git component a lot, and I even caught myself using Git component on the same component like 5 or 6 times in a row instead of just, declaring the component in a variable and calling on the variable instead. I've since fixed all of that so things are running even smoother. In fact, I think I shaved several seconds off of the load time for the environment just doing this alone. So my word of advice, if you're working in Unity, search your code for Git component and see if you're properly implementing it. It's always better to declare the component at the start of the script if possible, but sometimes that isn't always ideal, so at least make sure you're putting it in a variable first, since each Git component call is decreasing performance overall. With everything I've done so far, we're getting closer and closer to the private testing phase. If you want to help test the game, feel free to join the Discord. I plan to announce the private test there, along with giving people a special member role on the Discord, so you can access a tester channel where you can provide bug reports or feedback on the game. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. I'd like to potentially make some videos in the future that aren't devlogs, such as tutorials for pixel art and programming. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please leave a comment and let me know. Take care, and thanks for watching.